In this video, we got to talk about the best and the worst weapons in Apex Legends Season 12. We did have a few significant changes that have shaken up the weapon meta, on top of the addition of some older things coming back into rotation. Now, before I kick it off with D tier, I have to put one preface in here, just to clarify for any of you who will get confused, because judging by my last tier list, lots of you seem to struggle with it. Weapons that require hop-ups in order to be good guns will be judged off the weapon in its entirety, meaning if the P2020 is only good if you can find the hammer points, then that needs to be factored into the ranking. And also, it doesn't matter what order I put the weapons in for each tier, it just matters what tier that they're in. All right, now that I got that out of the way, let's start off with D tier. First one going into D tier is the Bowcheck Bow. This gun is good in certain instances, but I would bet it has one of the lowest pick rates because there's a lot that makes this gun feel pretty awkward. Now, if someone is good with the bow, it's certainly not D tier because it has a pretty high DPS. However, it's not that good up close and it's just not in the meta, so people tend to avoid it. So for that reason, I'm sticking with D tier on it. Next, we have the 30-30. This marksman rifle is decent, but it's basically been a miss since its arrival in Season 8. Apex has had to constantly tweak it, and it's still not super popular. The hip fire is odd, especially without the shatter caps. The drop-off on mid to long-range shots is severe, and the charge-up time for each shot, well, I'm just not sure that will ever be a weapon people will seek every game. Even if the G7 Scout was on the floor loot, I would see no reason to take a 30-30 over a Scout or the triple take. Lastly, in D tier, we have the P2020. Now, obviously, this gun is kind of a meme given how it is a handgun that no one has ever seriously used besides the early game off drop scenario. However, with the addition of hammer points, yes, it's better, and the unshielded damage is amplified the most on the P20 out of all of the guns for the hammer points. But if you have to run the P2020 until you can find those hammer points, that's not going to be great for you, because this gun past any early game scenario is not going to cut it, and for that reason it's got to be D tier. Yes, if you get it with hammer points, it can be a viable secondary throughout the game. Moving on to C tier. Starting off this tier is going to be the Devotion. This energy LMG is a lot to handle, especially without all of the attachments. Now, if we get a fully kitted Devotion, absolutely it's better than C tier, but that's the key. Weapons that require a ton of attachments and a hop up to be good are not going to be top tier. This requires some RNG, and it's an important variable when grading these weapons. This will also include the Havoc. I feel like this gun is good up close if you can get it charged before your enemy starts shooting, and if you have the turbocharger, that obviously helps it out. But when you compare the mid-range and hip fire to other assault rifles in this game, this weapon just doesn't cut it. The Havoc used to be meta back in Season 5, and it was a pain to go against, but it's never really been the same ever since they nerfed it. Alright, since 3 is a crowd, I'm throwing in the L-Star in as well. Maybe it could go to B tier, I don't know, but this gun was insane in Season 10. Now it's okay, but I don't see a ton of players using it anymore. And I certainly rarely ever use it. The recoil can be a lot, especially without a barrel stabilizer, and the hip fire is inconsistent to figure out. Next, we have the EVA 8. The shotgun is okay, but it's been outclassed severely by its counterparts. This shotgun's glory days are well behind us. Yes, there used to be an EVA 8 meta from Season 8 to about Season 10, but those days are gone, and for now, I think there are plenty of other shotguns that outclass this one. Last gun in C tier is going to be the Prowler. Now, I know this gun once again was in the meta previously, but these days it's really outclassed by a lot of other weapons. I do think the Gold Prowler is good, but that means you need to have max attachments on it for it to be good. And it's still only good up close. So it really kind of eliminates any sort of mid-range engagements with that weapon. Ultimately, there are plenty of better options out there. I will not be picking this gun up too often this season. Moving on to B tier. These weapons are right in the middle. Some of you guys got so pressed with me putting certain legends in B tier, and it's just important to note B tier is still good. Well, anyways, let's start off with the RE45. This automatic handgun is viable up close. It's kind of a mixture between the R99 and the R301, but the reality is this gun without the hammer points, and even with the hammer points, is not viable beyond anything close range. There's no stock that you can put on it, which doesn't really make it compete at those mid to long range distances, and I'm not talking 100 meters out, I'm talking even 40 to 60 meters. This gun is not going to cut it. I do think if you get the hammer points on it and you run it as a secondary, it can be very viable, but besides that scenario, I am not going to be using this gun this season. Second in B tier, we have the Alternator. The return of the alternator has been refreshing, and I do think this weapon is friendly for newer players. It can also be a viable weapon throughout any game. Ultimately, the reason I'm keeping it in B tier is due to the slower fire rate, and I think a couple of the SMGs are better. Third in B tier, we have the Hemlock. This burst assault rifle is a strong, heavy hitting weapon. It can take the boosted loader just like the Wingman, but it doesn't really have the same impact on the Hemlock. I think this weapon is strong, but it is a burst gun, and I don't think where it currently stands could make it anything above B tier. The hipfire on it has been increased over the course of the past few seasons, but it's still not going to outclass some of the other ARs. Next in B tier, we have the Sentinel. This bolt action sniper is amazing if you can get it fully kitted or close to that. Charging the shots up with shield cells also makes for some of the most satisfying kills in Apex history. I am loving this gun in Season 12, but I do acknowledge it can take a lot of work to get it fully kitted. Also, the base magazine only has 4 shots, and I think that could be buffed to make it more viable. Lastly, in B tier, we have the Mozambique. Now, I know this will surprise some of you that I ranked this higher than the EVA 8, but this gun has a consistent damage output. You could hit for 15 to 40, even if you're 10 to 20 meters away, and that's even without the hammer point hop up. Now, the Mozambique is never going to be like S tier because it is a pistol shotgun, and that does make it awkward in a lot of those shotgun fights you'll find yourself in, particularly like bubble fights where you're going against a Mastiff or a Peacekeeper. However, if you get a shotgun bolt on the Mozambique, the fire rate is extremely fast. You couple that with the hammer points, and you've got an insanely viable secondary for Season 12. You guys still there? All right, now let's talk about some of the best guns, A tier. First off, we have the Volt. This gun should have never gone into the care package because it really had no business coming off the floor loot. And even with the subtle buffs they gave it for going into the care package, it just feels unnecessary, just like when they put the R99 in the care package back in Season 6. I would probably put the Volt in S tier, however, with the fact that it's just not widely available anymore, it feels underwhelming to get it in a care package. This is one of my favorite guns in the entire game, but I'm not too happy with the care package change, so A tier for now. Next, we have the Car. This gun's recoil is a lot to handle, especially at anything beyond close range engagements. However, it does have the highest DPS for any SMG, and the one clip potential up close is extremely high. If this gun felt a little bit more consistent at those mid-range engagements like the R99 or Volt, it would definitely go in S tier for me. If you're on controller and you pick this weapon up, just hip fire it if you get up close to your enemies because it is insane and you should one clip them. Moving on in A tier to the charge rifle. This sniper is very strong simply because it's the only hit scan weapon in Apex. If you're going to be using a sniper, I definitely recommend the charge rifle or this second sniper I have in A tier, which is the longbow. This weapon is only available through the replicators during Season 12, but both of these weapons are great for upgrading your Evo armor from long distances and can still be used at most mid-range engagements. I am kind of missing the longbow being a part of the floor loot because I don't think I've crafted it once this season. However, I have been able to pick it up off people's death boxes. Next in A tier, we have the Rampage. Now, ultimately, this weapon should have gone in the care package with how broken it was in Season 11. And some of you may be wondering why I don't have it in S tier. And that's because when I look back at the Spitfire meta, I think the Spitfire was way easier to use in all sorts of fights. Rampage is OP, but its fire rate is much slower than the Spitfires, and its recoil pattern is definitely odd in some instances. I wouldn't argue with anyone who wanted to put it in S tier though. Next in A tier, we have the R99. This SMG has consistently been one of the best weapons in Apex's history. It is harder to use for newer players because of its fast fire rate, but once you can master the recoil, it's extremely viable in a lot of fights, and it's super satisfying to one clip somebody with. Lastly, in A tier, we have the Triple Take. This energy marksman rifle was definitely S tier last season. However, with the damage nerf and the nerf to the bullet drop, I've hit a few too many 21s this season with this gun, and I don't really know why. Something feels a bit off with it, but it is still very strong, and it can also flex as a shotgun if you know how to use it well. Now, we're at the best of the best S tier weapons. I do have some picks in here that will really surprise you. First, we have the G7 Scout. This is probably the least picked care package weapon, but it is very strong. The fire rate is fast, the DPS is high, and it obviously comes fully kitted when you get it. I never use the double tap because I'm not a big fan of the pacing of the shots, but this gun is a sleeper pick for Season 12. It doesn't really belong in the care package in my opinion, so I'm hoping next season they swap it out with something that feels more OP for a care package gun. However, this gun is the ultimate support weapon. You don't want to get too up close with it, but if you can, try to get to that mid-range sweet spot and help your teammates with it. It is extremely oppressive in the right hands. Next in S tier, we have the Kraber. This weapon is obviously the strongest weapon in the game, and it is the only gun that can one-shot somebody on any armor. It's incredibly annoying to get Krabered in the dome, but on the flip side, it has to be the most satisfying thing to do to someone. Next in S tier, we have the R301. This is like the M4 of Apex Legends. The recoil pattern is easy to use. The gun is extremely viable up close when you hip fire it. It can be used at long range, mid range. I mean, it's just so flexible, super consistent, probably the best gun overall in Apex. I know everybody from new players to veterans love this weapon. I hope they never alter it because it's super balanced. And if anybody is new, this is the gun you should be looking for. A close second to the R301 is the Flatline. Now, this gun is also only available through replicators in Season 12. This gun is like the AK-47 of Apex Legends. Recoil pattern is a bit more abrupt. The hip fire on it is very strong, and it can be used very successfully at long or mid-range engagements. I'm very disappointed that they put this gun in the replicator, and I know people will be like, well, you can get it every game if you're near a replicator, and it's like, yeah, but it also kind of drowned out the loot pool because I feel like I only find 30-30s and cars now, and I'd rather just have a flatline off drop, to be honest. This next pick, I'm going to combine these two weapons because I think they're similar to one another in their current rankings. Peacekeeper and the Mastiff. These two shotguns are the best two this season, and I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. This is refreshing to finally have because, as a lot of you know in the past, one of the shotguns usually dominated the meta. I think both the dual shell and the kinetic feeder are helpful hop-ups, but are not something that make or break these guns. The most important thing for either of them is just having a shotgun bolt. Also in S tier, we have the Spitfire. This LMG is top tier. It's easy to control, the hip fire is strong, you can dominate people at mid to long range as well. It's got like 50 something bullets in the magazine, it never stops shooting, you can basically wipe a whole squad with it. I mean, this gun is crazy. It's scary to think about what the Spitfire will look like when they remove it from the care package, because I presume that will come in a season or two. If you guys played before they put it in the package, it was extremely annoying to have on the floor loot. Spitfire meta lasted at least 2 seasons, maybe 3. So if you do find this weapon in a care package or on a death box, don't let somebody else get it. It's better if you or one of your teammates has it. Lastly, in S tier, we have the Wingman. The Wingman is the ultimate skill gap weapon in Apex Legends. By far the hardest gun to use, but one of the most satisfying if you are good with it. I do think the boosted loader hop-up really makes this gun better because it can add a few more bullets to the chamber, and every bullet matters in a gun like the Wingman. I know a lot of new players struggle with this weapon, but trust me, it's worth spending some time trying to improve with it. If you're still watching this video, thank you so much for watching until the end. I look forward to catching you on my next upload. Peace.